بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Inshallah, today is the last stage of the ages for our series, and after we come back from Umrah, we will start a new series, inshallah, on tafsir. We haven't done a tafsir in a long time, so we'll be doing most probably tafsir of Surah Hud, but wait till the flyer comes out. There might be different excerpts, different weeks, inshallah. Today we're going to be talking about Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah. And Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahmatullahi alayhi is an incredible sage. He is kind of the person that when people talk about being righteous and pious, he's one of those synonymous names. He's a master of tazkiyah, master of purification of the heart, and he is a tabi'i. He's in the era of Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi. But he doesn't always start off as a person who is very righteous. He used to be a thief and a robber. He was a gangster. And not only did he rob people, he had his own little gang. And the whole gang would go and they call it, in Arabic, they call this qutta' al-tariq. A person who stands, highway bandits. They're highway bandits, and what they do is that people who are on the road, as they say in Urdu, daku, they'll come and they'll just ambush you and they'll steal from you. South Africa is very known for this. In South Africa, after 8 p.m., the traffic light, the red light, turns into a stop sign. What do I mean by that? That means that you stop, you yield. If there's no cars coming, you go ahead. Because people camp out over there, and in that short time of the traffic light, they will pull up with guns to the car window, or they'll start spraying it with bullets, and they'll hijack the car. Every car in South Africa has a secret button located somewhere in the car, that if the car is, when the car is started, if the button is not pressed in like a mile or half a mile or something like that, the car shuts off. And it's like this anti-theft system. These bandits, I mean, Plano is one of the safest cities. So you don't really, you really get scared when you're driving or thinking that someone is going to steal from you or take from your house. But Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah was a person who was a bandit and he used to rob people and he used to steal from people. But وَكَانَ لَا يَتْرُكُ الصَّلَاةِ. He never missed salah. Salah was very important to him. And then you ask, how can it be possible that a man prays salah and then he robs people? Half the Muslim businesses that you get referred to in the masjid will end up doing the same to you. They will rob you after you prayed salah with them. So the beard doesn't mean that the person is pious or righteous or that they're going to be good or honest with you. وَيُوَاظِبُ عَلَى الْجَمَاعَةِ. And he would come and he would pray salah with jama'ah. Jama'ah was very important. So we have to rob you, but wait, we'll rob you after salah. And if there were people in his gang that didn't pray salah or were not habitual in salah, he kicked them out of the gang. You know how people say Fajr gang? Salah, yeah, this was his actual Fajr gang. And there was a massive group of people that were coming and they were planning on robbing them. And one of the guys knew that in this area there are robbers and thieves. So he has money, and Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah was a man that he used to wear, he used to have his jubbah and he would have a topi on, and in his neck there would be a tasbih in his neck. So he kind of looked pious. And there's this person with his group, they're traveling and they're trying to avoid the robbers. So they see Fudayl ibn ʻIyād pitched up in his tent, and he hides some money and he says, you know what, I'm gonna give it to someone to hold it so that we don't get robbed and we can come and collect it back afterwards. So he goes and he sees Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah, and he gives him the money. And Fudayl ibn ʻIyād tells him, he's like, what are you doing with this? He's like, oh, I'm trying to avoid being robbed. He's telling this to the robbers. He's like, can you hold my money for me? Fudayl says, yeah, just put it in the corner over there. So he puts the money in the corner. And And this was like a great loot for his gang. And Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah stops his people and says, all right, you're not going to steal from these people. And because also, some of them even tried attempting, but all that money had come in this bag and was sent into the corner, right? And Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahmatullah alayhi, another interesting thing that he did, whoever he stole from, or whichever house they robbed, he documented. I robbed so-and-so at so-and-so time on so-and-so day, and this is how much we robbed them. And then he would, he was the big gangster amongst them. He was the Al Pacino, so he would then distribute the money to his people. And they came to him and they were like, look, we don't have much money with us. And we tried to rob, most of the people didn't have money. He's like, it wasn't a good loot. So he just listened to this. And then that guy comes back. The guy comes to Fudayl ibn ʻIyād and he says, and he enters the tent, and he realizes that, hey, these were some of the people that were trying to rob us. And he's like, what did I do? I just gave my money to the robbers. So he goes to Fudayl ibn ʻIyād and he's like, where's my money? And Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah says, in that corner, in the bag where you left it. He's like, take it and go. So the people that were the gangsters that were with him, they turned to him and they said, we didn't even get a good robbery done. We barely made money. This guy gave you the money in your hands. And you should have kept it. Why did you give it back to him? We're thieves. He said, we didn't have to even ask, he gave it to you. He said, the man looked at my face and did husnul dhan with me. He saw me and he had a good thought of me. And he thought that I'm a trustworthy person and that you could leave amana with me. And I saw that if a man like him could see a man like me and think good about me, I said, then his creator can also forgive me and love me once again. So that's the first step that happens, where he has this interaction. Then after that, he goes and he starts robbing other caravans, and he would take their money, and he would, one of the people around asked him, they said, Aina kabirukum, where is your leader? They said, he's not with us right now. They said, okay, where is he? They said, you see that tree right there? Hunaka shajaratun? You see that tree with the little water by it? They said, yeah. They said, he's praying salah over there. So the guy goes and he waits over there and he asks the people, he says, Laysa hada waqtu salah? This isn't the time for salah? Laysa hada waqtu salah? They said, yeah, but he's praying nafil. He said, okay. And they're all eating. He said, well, aren't you guys going to wait for him to eat? They said, no, he's fasting. He said, it's not the time for fasting. He said, yeah, but he does nafil fast. And the man was really surprised. And he waits by Fudayl while Fudayl is praying salah with khushu'. And after his salah was done, he looks at him and he says, these are two opposite things that can't come together. Fasting from a person who robs people, and prayer from a person who goes and attacks people. And then he reads a verse of the Quran. وَآخَرُونَ اعْتَرَفُوا بِذُنُوبِهِمْ خَلَطُوا عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَآخَرَ سَيِّئًا. And there are other people, they know what wrong they're doing. They have some good deeds, they have some bad deeds, and the book of deeds is a mixture of good and bad. So Fudayl ibn ʻIyād stays silent, stays quiet, but he still continued stealing. And he used to steal all his money, and there was this one girl that he really liked. I used to give her everything. But he didn't rob women. He had a really interesting code of ethics. And he used to go at nighttime, and he was in love with her. And one day while he was robbing, he hears a person reciting in the masjid, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Has the time not come for the people who believe for their hearts to be aware of Allah. He said, after that moment, I got so shook. I turned and I started saying, قَدْ آنَ الْوَقْتِ قَدْ آنَ الْوَقْتِ. He fell down and he said, قَدْ آنَ الْوَقْتِ. Allah, the time has come. The time has come, and I do tawbah, and I will never rob another person again. And the money he had accumulated, he went back and started repaying everyone back. And every person he robbed, he gave them their money back. And he goes and he is he's very embarrassed of himself. And he would sit on the side, and now people knew that this was the, you know how, I don't know if you guys ever know gangs or anything about this, but they have their turfs, right? So this is an area where they operate and they rob in, and you know, the other, if you know the Bloods and the Crips, then you know, they can't come here. They, you know, these are actual things that people get into fights and gang wars on because someone is dealing in their turf or they're using their street corner. So people knew this was Fudayl ibn ʻIyād street, and one group of people were traveling and they got lost and started going in that area, and they got scared and they said, hey, we're about to get robbed. And then people started saying, Abashiru, فَإِنَّ فُضَيْلَ قَدْ تَابَ. No, not anymore. Fudayl has done tawbah. Know that you can go easy from here. One time, Fudayl ibn ʻIyād, rahimahullah, put a rope around his neck, felt really bad, and he said, you know what, I've been such a bad person. The Hajj, the legal penalty should be exercised upon me. So he goes to the Sultan's palace and tells his servant that's with him, go to him and tell him to establish the Hajj on me. When they arrive at the Sultan's palace, the Sultan sees him, looks at him, says, this man looks really pious, honors him, respects him. And he says, you're not worthy, meaning you didn't do something that requires you to get the legal penalty. And then he sends him to his house. When he gets to his house, he knocks on the door. And they hear his voice. And the Sultan says, قَدْ تَغَيَّرَ صَوْتَهُ. Seems like your voice changed. Everything okay? Did you get sick or did you get hurt? He said, I did. He said, where did you get hurt? Which part? He said, my heart. He said, my heart. He actually went back to his wife. This was his wife's house. When he goes back to his wife, he knocks on the door. She hears his voice. She's like, everything okay? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm in pain. What's paining you? He's like, my heart is broken. I have pain in my heart. And then he goes to her. He says, I plan on going for Hajj. Will you join me? She says, absolutely, I'll join you. Then he goes with his wife to Hajj to Makkah Mukarramah. And it's easy for them. They enter Makkah, and that's where he meets Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayh. And he learns from Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayh. He actually becomes one of the 40 scholars that Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayh would consult, and specialists when they would theorize what theoretical fiqh issues could be. So he was one of the 40 scholars. And Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah remains in Makkah. So while other people, great sheikhs like Hassan al-Basri and Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, they all lived in different parts of the Muslim empire, Fudayl ibn ʻIyād used to sit next to the Kaaba. And that was his place. And that's where he would worship Allah, and that's where he dedicated his life. Harun Rashid was one of the khulafa. And Harun Rashid, and this used to happen back in the day, you know, and every person should do this. Every person, when you feel your heart is kind of declining, go and sit with the awliya of Allah. Sit with the friends of Allah and let your heart ignite. So Harun Rashid tells Fadl al-Barmaki. Fadl al-Barmaki is another individual. He says, I want to go today to a man that's going to check my nafs. That's going to check my nafs. You know, you have this, one of my friends says this all the time, you got to check your nafs. You got to keep your nafs in check. He's like, I want to go to a sheikh that's not going to give me flowery words and things. I want someone who's going to check my nafs. So they go, he takes him to the house of this great sheikh. He's also a narrator of hadith. The first hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, is narrated from him as well, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, great scholar of hadith. They knock on Sufyan ibn Uyayna's house, and Sufyan ibn Uyayna says, who is there? They said, the Khalifa is at your door. He turns to the Khalifa and he says, why did you tire yourself? You should have told me, you're such an important job. I would have came to your palace. Harun Rashid turns to his Fadl al-Barmaki and he says, "You take me to this guy?" I said, "I want to check my nafs." Now someone's going to be like, "Oh, why did you come? I'm so sorry. Let me come to you." He says, "That's not what I'm looking for." And the Sufyan ibn Uyayna says, if he wants to check his nafs, take him to Fudayl ibn Iyād. He'll check his nafs. So they go to Fudayl ibn Iyād, rahimahullah. They get to his house, and when they get close to his house, they hear him recite the Quranic verse, أَمْ حَسِبَ الَّذِينَ اجْتَرَحُوا السَّيِّئَاتِ أَن نَجْعَلَهُمْ كَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Do the people who have wounded themselves with sins think that they're equal to the people who do good deeds? Harun Rashid says, I swear to God, if we leave right now, I got what I was looking for. See, this ayah is, we wound ourselves with sins and then think that we're like the people who are so dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Harun Rashid says, go ahead, knock on the door. They knock on the door. Fudayl ibn Iyād says, "Who's at my door?" They said, "Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers." He says, وَمَا شَأْنِي مَعَ. So what do you want with me? I'm a poor man. أَنَا رَجُلٌ فَقِيرٌ. What do you want from me? And I'm a man who's running from my sins, and he doesn't open the door. Leaves them standing outside. The guy that was with him, he knocks on the door, and he says, his name is Hajj. He says, "Open the door. طَاعَةُ أُولِي الْأَمْرِ وَاجِبًا." He says, obeying the Amir al-Mu'mineen is compulsory on you. You have to obey the people in position. Open your door. Fudayl ibn Iyād responds and says, "La tashawwishuni." He says, "Stop giving me anxiety." Hajib says, "Open the door. You need, the Amir al-Mu'mineen is at your door. Open the door." So Fudayl says, now look how he's talking to the man who's ruling the Muslim empire. And Harun Rashid is no small man to trifle with. He says, "Amma bil idhn fala." He's like, if it's permission, I don't give him permission to come to my house. But if it's because you're mentioning the command of the Amir, if he's asking me, can he come? No, he can't. But if he's commanding me, then I have to listen to it because Allah ordained me. He's like, come inside. He's like, but my time is my time. So he comes, and as he enters, Fudayl ibn Iyād blows out the candle. So now the whole room goes dark. And then Harun Rashid's hand touches the hand of Fudayl ibn Iyād. And Fudayl ibn Iyād says, "Ma alyana hadha al-kaf, law naja min an-nar." He said, "Hey, how soft is this hand? Only if it saved itself from the fire of Jahannam." Harun Rashid looks at him and says, "This statement is enough to shake my heart." وَقَامَ وَاشْتَغَلَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. Fudayl ibn Iyād gets up, starts praying a salah. There's people in the house. He doesn't care. Gets up, starts praying a salah. Harun Rashid begins to cry. After Fudayl ibn Iyād finishes his salah, he says, they tell him, talk to them. تَكَلَّمْ مَعَ أَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Talk to him. And he looks at Harun Rashid and he says, جَدُّكَ كَانَ عَمَّ النَّبِي صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم طَلَبَ مِنَ النَّبِي صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم أَن يَجْعَلَهُ أَمِيرًا. He said, your great-grandfather, meaning Abbas radiallahu anhu, asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to make him an amir or a leader over a group of people. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you seek position, you seek status to be leaders in the community. Know that this will be regret and this will be a source of pain for you on the day of judgment if you don't fulfill your job. Harun Rashid says to him, Zidna. He says, tell me more. So then Fudayl ibn Iyād says, when Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullah alayhi became the Khalifa, he called the shuyukh around him. He called Salih bin Abdullah bin Umar, Raja ibn Haywa, Muhammad ibn Ka'b. And he said, I have been tested with this position and this status and this responsibility. Give me advice. So they told him, they said, if you want to be saved on the day of judgment from the punishment of Allah, فَأَقِمْ كُلَّ مِنْ شُيُوخِ أَهْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ مَقَامَ أَبِيكَ. Do three things. Number one, every scholar you see, treat them like you treat your father. He says, وَالشَّبَابَ مِنْهُمْ مَخَامَ إِخْوَانِكَ. The youth of the community, treat them like they're your brothers. وَالْأَطْفَالَ مِنْهُمْ مَقَامَ أَوْلَادِكَ. And the children of the community, treat them like your own children. And the people of the community, treat them like they're your own family. He said, because we're all from one Islam. فَزُرْ أَبَاكَ. Go visit your father, meaning go visit the scholars. And be generous with your brothers. And be gentle with your children. Fudayl ibn ʻIyād rahimahullah says, this is my advice to you. And I fear that this face of yours will burn in the fire of Jahannam. So fear Allah. And wake up and be ready to answer to Allah. Because on the day of judgment, every person under your kingdom, you are responsible to. And even if there is a hungry woman in her house, Allah will ask you, what did you do to alleviate her? I gave you power. What did you do to solve this problem? He said, you think position is, you get all the perks of it. Remember, Allah will question you for all of your subjects. And did you do justice between an oppressor and an oppressed? When Harun Rashid heard this, he fainted. Hajj turns to him and says, what's wrong with you? Ahlaktahu. You killed him. You ruined him. And Fudayl turns around and says, fiery man turns around and says, La. He says, I saved him. You ruined him. Ya Haman. Who was Haman?
Pharaoh's advisor.
Pharaoh's advisor. So he says, Uskut ya Haman. Shut up, Haman. His name is Hajj. So Harun Rashid begins to cry even more. And he says, you literally just basically called me Fir'aun. He said, you called my advisor Haman, and you basically called me Fir'aun. So he turns to Fudayl ibn ʻIyād and he says, Sheikh, do you have any debts? Usually the scholars and stuff, they don't have much, so they're in debt. He said, I do, I have one debt. He's like, what is it? He said, I still owe obedience to Allah. And then Harun says, no man, I'm talking about, do you owe people? He said, Allah has blessed me enough, and I don't complain to anybody, because there's no complaint to have. So Harun Rashid grabs a bag full of gold coins and drops it in front of him. And he says, before you say anything to me, هَذَا مِن مَالِ الْحَلَالِ. He said, this is 100% halal. I got this from the inheritance of my mother, that I'm giving it to you, Fudayl. For them it's barakah, right? These people will use it to be barakah in their wealth. Fudayl ibn ʻIyād looks at him and says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, ma nafa'atka nasaihi. He says, all my advice hasn't benefited you at all. He said, you want to harm me and I'm trying to save you? He said, what are you talking about? He said, didn't I not tell you that pay everyone back their right? He said, and you're here giving me money. He said, go to the people of the ummah that you do owe, that are deserving. He's like, I said everything to you and you're still not getting the picture. If it was us, we'd say, Jazakallah khair. I'm going to use this for khair, inshallah. Sadaqah jariyah for your mother. One time he was in Arafat, and there was a lot of people, because again, he did Hajj every year, right? And there was a lot of people in Hajj. And someone asked him that, do you think Allah, what do you think Allah will do with them? He said, if this many people stood at the house of a person and came up and were begging for a coin, and the person was wealthy, he'd give it to them. He's like, and Allah is richer than any rich person you know. He's like, this many people begging Allah, standing before him in this haram by his Kaaba, but in Arafat, he's like, Allah won't leave them empty-handed. In another Hajj, someone asked him, they said, what do you think will happen with the Hujjaj? Like, do you think Allah will forgive them? He said, Na'am, marhumeen. He said, they're all, inshallah, they will all be forgiven, lo lam akun ana baynahum, as long as I'm not with them. But if I'm with them, then Allah might get so angry at me that He may not forgive the rest of them. His humility is, when we start going down his his advices and some of the interactions, you're gonna really see the breadth of this man. He's subhanallah. Someone asked him, what is the thing that we can do so we are not seen as people who are scared? You know, the Muslims are seen today, they're scared. People see, like, you know, Trump, you know, we're all scared, or this, we know what's going to happen. He said, if you were truly scared of Allah, you wouldn't be scared of anyone else. He's like, no one would see you as a scared person if you're truly scared the one you were supposed to be scared of. Someone asked him, when does a person reach the height of their love for Allah? He responded, when donating or giving for the sake of Allah, or Allah not giving them, when Allah gives them and Allah doesn't give them, is equal for them. Like, they don't get, their alhamdulillah is not louder than their I'm doing sabr for Allah. It's equal. They get it, alhamdulillah. They don't get it, alhamdulillah to that too. I'm okay. By Allah giving me more, it doesn't become like I just become super duper excited. I'm so blessed. I'm blessed even when I don't have it. He says that's mahabbah of Allah. That your relationship is not a transaction with Allah. That only when you get from Allah, then you're content with Allah. And when you don't get from Allah, then it's like, you know, things could be better. You know, things are going tough. I'ta wal mana'. Allah giving you and Allah not giving you. They're both equal in the person's eyes. They love Allah despite anything. No strings attached. He said, he was asked, there's a lot of like Hajj stories in here. He said, what do you say about a person who wants to go for Hajj and wants to say labbaik, but he is so scared that when he says labbaik, there will be a response that says la labbaik, you're not welcome. And he doesn't attempt it. He's scared that he gets there and he doesn't get to see, like, Allah bars him from there. And Al-Fudayl ibn ʻIyād says, I think this man is one of the closest people to Allah because of how unworthy he thinks he is. He's like, that humility of that person is proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was asked, what is the nucleus of deen? He said, intellect. He was asked, what is the nucleus of intellect? The asl of it. He said, al-hilm, being forbearing, not being reactive. So they said, okay, what's the nucleus of being forbearing? He said, sabr. He said, master sabr, and that's the asl of the deen. The whole deen is about sabr on blessings, that you don't use them wrong, and sabr on difficulties. That's the whole thing. Allahumma rizqna sabr. Someone went to Al-Fudayl ibn ʻIyād and they spent the night by him. And you know, if you've ever been in a company of scholars or shuyukh, the night gets long and you're talking about the deen and Allah and this discussion, discourse, and this happened, the night gets long. So the night got long and they were discoursing and they were talking and discussions were happening. And they prayed a little bit salah. The next morning, the guy that was there, it was like, what a great night we had last night. We spent it, I feel so good about last night. We spent, you know, like, how many of us have been in Ramadan, or we've been out, you know, you've been in programs and lectures and talks and halaqah, you prayed your tahajjud, you get up and like, yo, that was such a great night, right? You tell your friends, we should do this more often. You know, it happens all the time. The guy says, dude, this was an amazing night. Al-Fudayl ibn ʻIyād says, it was a terrible night. He's like, what do you mean? We did all the good things. He's like, no. He's like, we did all the good things, and then you said this to me, hoping that it would impress me and make me happy and be like, yeah, it was a good night. He's like, we used the worship of Allah to get that out of me. And me, I was hoping you would say something so that I could respond and agree with you. He's like, we both ruined it. He said, we worshiped Allah, but we're trying to cash out on our feelings. My teacher, Mufti MWK, used to say something very profound. He said, you are obligated to pray salah your entire life. You're obligated to worship. You will have no obligation to get some spiritual feeling. That is min Allah. You have to pray even if you don't feel anything. You have to fast even if you don't feel anything. You have to stay continuous to it. I'm going to be going a little quick through these because there's a lot of advices of his. There's one story I'm going to share with you guys. It's actually kind of funny. How many of y'all ever heard of the nasheed, Ya Abid al-Haramain? You ever heard of that nasheed? Ya Abid al-Haramain. It's a very well-known nasheed, right? And Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahmatullah alayhi, and Fudayl ibn ʻIyād were contemporaries. Fudayl ibn ʻIyād would spend his time by the Kaaba. Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahmatullah alayhi, spent his time in three things. A portion of his time, or 1 year, I think he would divide in a year or like in months, 6 months or something, where he would do business, he would teach, and he would do jihad. Right, three things. But he was a mujahid. He would fight in the frontiers, in defense. So someone came to him from Makkah, and they said, hey, you know, we just came from Makkah, and then we met Fudayl ibn ʻIyād. So then Abdul Mubarak let him have it. He wrote him a letter, and which was poetry, and which he like wrecked Fudayl ibn ʻIyād. Remember, they're contemporaries. So I'll go through the translation for you. He says, Ya Abid al-Haramain, O worshipper of the two holy mosques, had you witnessed what we witnessed in war, you would have known that compared to our jihad, your ibadah is a child's play. For every tear you shed on your cheek, we have shed in its place blood on our chests. You are playing with your worship while we are offering your worship. He said, you're playing around. Okay, great. He said, we're doing your responsibility by protecting the lands. He said, Mujahideen offered their blood and person. He said, the smell of nice perfume, you like it. You know, like going to the masjid, smelling nice, going to the haram, you know, all pumped up. It's like you like doing that. He said, our perfume is the dust on the ground that our body gets dragged on. And I swear to God, it smells more better than the musk you wear. And he says, it has reached us from the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, the martyr is not dead. And this is true, and there is no lie. He said, the dust of the people of Allah is never equal to 1,000 men while the smoke is climbing. He says, meaning that people see these people and this, and you know, they're famous and all. He's like, you might get more smoke. This is all smoke. There's nothing behind it. It looks big. It looks grand. Everyone sees it. He's like, but we are doing the real job and real task. If you get a chance, you know, listen to the nasheed, Ya Abid al-Haramain. Very old school nasheed. How many of you have actually heard it by show of hands? Only one person here? 2 people? No one has ever heard of Ya Abid al-Haramain? I'm sure if you like play it, you'd be like, oh yeah, I've heard this before. It's a very, very famous nasheed. He said, if you can, live in a place that no one can see you and you can't see anyone, so that you are not stuck in between wasting your time. In another place he says, the person who feels, and this is really powerful, and I feel like this is something that we all suffer from. He says, Man istawhasha al-khalwa wasta'nasa bil-khalq فَهُوَ بَعِيدٌ مِّنَ السَّلَامَةِ. He said, whosoever feels anxious when they're alone, they feel at peace and comfortable when they're with people, he's like, they are very far from peace. If you struggle with your own time and you need people around you and it gives you peace and calms you, he's like, you lost the plot. That's not peace. True peace is where you carry it wherever you go. True peace isn't what you're feeding off of other people. That if people are not there, then you feel, oh, I'm bored. I have no friends. There's no one there that I know. And that happens to us. Some people are like, well, we're not going to go. Hey, I don't know anybody there. How many times has that happened with us? I don't know anyone there. I don't want to be the only person. That's a great time. These people, they sought these times. They looked for it. This is what they wanted. He says, إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا ابْتَلَاهُ بِمَصَائِبٍ. When Allah loves someone, He tests them with difficulties and He puts on them sadness. And when He hates someone, He opens up the doors of the dunya. He says 5 things. خَمْسٌ مِنْ عَلَامَاتِ الشَّقْوَى. He said 5 things, if you have them in you, or any one of these, it means you're an unfortunate person. That means you're far from Allah. Number 1, jumudul ayn. You can't cry. Your eyes don't cry out of the fear and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your heart is hard. You don't have haya. You're immodest. You desire the dunya a lot. And number 5, you have long hopes and ambitions. Like you think you're going to live a really long life and you have these really flowery dreams and you think that everything is going to be yours and you have this really painted picture. He says these are signs of shaqawa. He says a person fears Allah as much as they know the hereafter or believe in the hereafter. He said if you want to measure how much you fear Allah, it's how much you actually believe that the hereafter exists. Because the person who knows for sure the hereafter exists, their actions and reactions are very different. He says, and coming in the dunya is very easy. Leaving the dunya is very hard. Children come in, you don't even ask to come into the dunya. It's very easy. But exiting from the dunya and exiting safely to your accountability, he's like, that is a difficult thing. He says, no person has been given anything from the dunya, but something of it was taken from him from the akhirah. He's like, if you're getting stuff in this dunya, it may be in lieu of the akhirah. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu used to do this. He used to grab, there's a riwayat in Bukhari, I believe. He grabbed a soft handkerchief and he said, Bakhin, Bakhin, ya Abu Hurairah. He said, Abu Hurairah, soft handkerchief? You get to blow your nose on something soft? He would begin to cry and say, it seems that we are getting the reward for our good deeds in the dunya by getting these comforts. ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. And you would read this verse. He says, don't seek 3 things, because you'll hardly find it. A scholar whose actions are more than his knowledge. A person who does good deeds and his sincerity is equal to his good deeds. And a friend who does not backbite you. He said these 3 things are very hard to come by. As people talk smack about people. He says, you have a friend? Basically means that person is going to talk some negative or say some negative things about you. He says, if I was to take an oath and say, Wallahi, I am a show-off. You know when people do good deeds and stuff, and someone can do it for Allah's sake, someone can do it? It's called riya, right? So he says, if I was to take an oath and say, I do riya, he said, I would most probably be saying the truth. He's like, and if I was to take an oath and say, Wallahi, I'm not doing it to show off, he's like, I will most probably have to expiate my oath. You see these legends and these people who are so close to their life is defined by their relationship with Allah, yet they feel as if they haven't done a dent, they haven't done anything. And no matter how much they do, they always feel that we are far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the sign of someone who has sincerity, because the one who is close to Allah constantly thinks, I haven't done enough. And a sign of a person saying, well, at least I do this. At least I pray. So many people that don't even do this. At least I, put on this. At least I do this. At least Allah says, يَمُنُّونَ عَلَيْكَ أَنْ أَسْلَمُوا. Are you telling me that at least, قُلْ لَا تَمُنُّوا عَلَيَّ إِسْلَامَكُمْ. Don't put that in front of me. بَلِ اللَّهِ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ أَنْ هَدَاكُمْ لِلْإِيمَانِ. It was Allah that did you a favor. You think you did me a favor by doing at least this, at least that? No. You did yourself a favor, and Allah did a favor on you that He gave you Iman. He says that the true tawakkul is that you don't have hope in anyone but Allah, and you don't fear anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, I am scared to go to the bathroom because you have to expose yourself. He said that I'm exposing myself in front of Allah. He's like, I use the bathroom once every 3 days. He also ate very little bit too. And then he says, how many people go to the toilet and come out clean? And how many people go to the garba, go in clean and come out dirty? Because he was a man of the garba, right? That's what he's seen Hajj. So how many people go to the bathroom and they come out clean? How many go to the garba and come out dirty? May Allah protect us, that we go to the house of Allah and we come back not forgiven. That we truly, may Allah protect us from failing that. That's a massive feeling. May Allah protect us, may Allah protect us. He says 2 things destroy the heart: too much eating and too much sleeping. The last thing I'll say of his advice is someone came to him and they said, can you give us advice? And he just read one ayah of the Quran, Surah Yusuf, verse 39. أَأَرْبَابٌ مُتَفَرِّقُونَ خَيْرٌ أَمِ اللَّهُ الْوَاحِدُ الْقَهَّارُ. Are multiple gods better or one Allah? Like people say, there's one other statement of his that, this one. He said, if someone asks you, do you love Allah? Faskut. He said, don't respond. لِأَنَّكَ إِن قُلْتَ لَا. If you say, no, I don't, you're a kafir. وَإِن قُلْتَ نَعْمْ كَذَبْتَ. إِن قُلْتَ لَا كَفَرْتَ. وَإِن قُلْتَ نَعْمْ كَذَبْتَ. He said, if you say no, you're a kafir. If you say yes, you're a liar. لِأَنَّ أَفْعَالَكَ لَيْسَتْ أَفْعَالَ الْمُحِبِّينَ. Because your actions aren't the actions of someone who loves Allah. Now obviously, he's speaking on a very high level. If someone tells you, do you love Allah? Don't just stay quiet. People are going to be like, of course you love Allah, right? It makes these people's lives, some things you can emulate, and some things are just makes you reflect, this is who I need to be. Because when you guys are playing basketball or sports or in business or in life, you have these successful people and you're trying to go down their path and replicate them so you could be successful. These are the dawns of the Akhirah. They're the sages of the Akhirah. They're the people who taught us in this dunya what it means to detach from the dunya. And I hope that in this series, the different quotes and the lives that you've heard of these different scholars, and maybe in your life you'll hear their names again in a khutbah here and there. You'll hear their names in passing. But very rarely will you hear their lives again and their quotes and their statements again. It's not very often. But at least you will leave knowing that there were people who lived in this dunya and whose mission and whose only purpose was, how do we love Allah and become close to Allah? With that being said, inshallah, we'll open it for Q&A. If anyone has any questions on this subject or any subject. Or not. Going once.
The clarification on the muhram for a woman who goes to Hajj and Umrah, if she doesn't have a muhram, what is, last time when you were teaching, if a woman is working and if she has the money, it becomes a wajib on her, but if she doesn't have a muhram, what is the ruling on that?
Mahram.
Mahram, sorry.
The ruling on mahram is for the Saudi government.